Brothers and sisters, peace be with you. Praise the Lord. It's time to read the Bible again. We continue with Genesis chapter 16. Today we study verse 15 and 16. Verse 15. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son he had born. Hagar met the Lord near a spring in the desert. God told Hagar to return to her mistress. God also promised Hagar and said to her that her son would be named Ishmael, for God had heard and looked after her in her misery. So Hagar returned to Sarai. When it was time, she gave birth to a son to Abram, called Ishmael, as God ordered. Verse 16, Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Abram was 75 years old when he entered the land of Canaan. 11 years had passed since Abram first entered Canaan until the time Ishmael was born. What do these two verses tell us? When we read the Bible, we should read the parts that were not recorded in the Bible, so to read between the lines. Sometimes the parts left out from the Bible revealed God's truth more profoundly than what was written in the Bible. We find the parts left out here in Genesis chapter 17, verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him. From Genesis chapter 16, verse 16, we know that Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. God once again appeared to Abram when he was 99 years old. In other words, for 13 years, from Abram was 86 years old to when Abram was 99 years old, the Bible did not record anything that Abram did or said. During the first 11 years after Abram entered the Promised Land, the Bible clearly recorded the stuffs that Abram encountered in following God. The account of those 11 years had become a very good blueprint for us, the Christians, who followed Abram's journey of faith. However, after Ishmael was born, for 13 years, God did not speak to Abram. In those 13 years, Abram did not follow God more closely. What were Abram doing for those 13 years then? Dear brothers and sisters, if you have become a Christian for many years, try to compare yourself to Abram. Have you also experienced a period of time where God does not speak to you? You do not receive any revelation from God. The days go by and you are consumed by everyday busyness. Only when God once again appeared to you, you realize suddenly that you waste such a long time. This is a very serious warning. As we said before, Abram's journey in following God is also a Christian's life of consecration. Every time we stop at a new station, when we receive a new vision or revelation, we once again consecrate ourselves in renewal. To consecrate ourselves includes the transfer of the ownership of ourselves. I once was my own Lord before, but now God is my Lord. In this transfer of ownership, we first experience the change of our position. We need to remain in a proper position. At this time, Abram already resided in Hebron, where he remained in constant communication with God. Next, we experience the change of our existence, knowing that from God we receive life and breath. We then understand that the God we serve is the God Most High and the Creator of heaven and earth. He is also the one who loves us. So we will not be consumed in everyday busyness, knowing that God is the center of our existence. Knowing that God is the purpose of our life will lead to the change of our goal. Our goal before was to achieve something earthly, but now we establish goals according to God's will. Knowing God's promise is for us to have offspring and land. Land is to be gained by offspring. At this moment, Abram knew that his goal is to have offspring. Yet during the process of obtaining offspring, we must labor. The different types or levels of laboring bring to different changes of our constitution. We see that God promised Abram that his offspring or seed will be like countless stars in the night sky. Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord credited to him as righteousness. Abram had God's promise, yet God's promise was not fulfilled until later. Waiting for God to fulfill his promises is a long process of many tests and trials. It seems impossible for Abram to have his offspring when the God had kept Sarai from having children. Under circumstances like this, would you still be able to keep on waiting? Dear brothers and sisters, waiting in difficult situations is indeed a challenging lesson for us to learn. This is the most effective tool of God. God is eternal. With the Lord, 1,000 years are like a day, but men are impatient. After a long time, our secret thoughts and our hidden characteristics are revealed. While Abraham and Sarah were waiting for God to fulfill his promise, they wanted to give God a hand. When the fulfillment of God's promise seemed so far away, they indeed used their own means to obtain an offspring. Thus Hagar was involved. First came promise, then came law or legalism. Men rely on themselves. Men use the method of legalism to achieve the fulfillment of God's promise. Dear brothers and sisters, as we study Abram's life, do we not see some similarities in ourselves? When we are saved by God's grace, we are humbled by a thankful heart. We know that God is holy, and we also want to be holy. That God is just, and we also want to be just. That God is love, and we also need to love men. So when we fail in doing everything God is, do we then turn to extrinsic legalism? It seemed through this legalist path we might be able to achieve God's holiness, justice, and love. Legalism reflects the characteristics of God. What is harmful is that we rely on ourselves to make it to the standard marked by the law. From Abram and Sarai, we learn that the result of taking the legalistic path is quick and easy. Once they treated Hagar as a concubine, they quickly got Ishmael as the result. But Isaac, the offspring of God's promise, who was born of God's grace, did not come until 14 years later. There were 13 years between the time that Ishmael was born and the time that Sarai became pregnant. In these 13 years, God did not reveal to Abram. God did not speak to Abram. The Bible did not really tell us what Abram was doing during the 13 years. The blank page of the untold 13 years is very interesting. We can fill in the blank with our own experiences. We can imagine how proud and complacent Abram was after the birth of Ishmael, thinking that relying on his own, he finally got the offspring of God's promise. Abram probably enjoyed so much of Ishmael's company because Ishmael is the fruit of Abram's hard labor, the result of his own effort. During these 13 years, Abram did not gain any new revelations from God. Abram did not have any consecration in renewal. During these 13 years, Abram did not take any steps forward in his journey of following God. Abram did not even realize that he stopped following God. Abram was consumed by his own pride and satisfaction. During these 13 years, Abram enjoyed the company of Ishmael, and Hagar came to power. But the dearest wife of Abram, Sarai, was humiliated. When Hagar was only pregnant with Ishmael, she started to despise Sarai. We can imagine how Hagar's status changed and became more important now that Ishmael was born. She probably ruled over big and small matters. Although Sarai was also promised an offspring, but before her offspring came, we can imagine how humiliated Sarai was. Dear brothers and sisters, we need to ponder on the spiritual meaning of this incident. We also need to think about the self-reflections that we ought to have on the journey in the following God. I firmly believe that although Abram was occupied by his busy daily activities, although Abram was filled with the satisfaction and pride brought by Ishmael, a part of him was absorbed in his own thoughts because God did not seem so real anymore. It seemed that Abram still resided in communication with God in Hebron, but God did not speak to him. God did not lead Abram to the next step. Looking from the outside, it looked so prosperous and revived. But when Abram sees Sarai's humiliation and loneliness, Abram must have felt this emptiness in his heart. What does it mean that Hagar rose to power? It means to weigh the value of man by the standard of law. The law has certain requirement of man. If you work hard and achieve something according to the law, you are considered good. If you cannot reach the requirement of the law, you are considered bad. Under the law, there exists a set of rules that reward the good and punish the bad. In secular world, this is the highest achievement of politics. If a nation can become stronger, it is only because its government can reward the good and punish the bad effectively. Yet, the best results or the highest achievements of this earthly world cannot even reach the threshold of God's kingdom. How so? Because under legalism, the good gets rewarded and the bad gets punished. What is good and what is bad must first be determined. Worldly definitions are all relative and within the limit of time. It is based on the perception of the majority to determine good and bad. Yet, in God's kingdom, His value is obsolete, and in eternity, in God's kingdom, only God is good. Men all have a sinful nature, thus cannot be good. We need God, who is good to pay a price for our evilness, so that we can be connected to God's goodness, holiness, and justice, and so that the most beautiful life of God can be manifested in us. From Abram's experience, we know that he probably enjoyed so much of Ishmael in the 13 years. But Abram lived a life of 13 years without any communication with God, until one day, when the time was met, God again revealed himself to Abram. We have to know that there were 14 years difference between Ishmael and Isaac. 14 is a very important number in the Bible. 14 is 7 times 2. 7 is a complete number, and 2 is to testify. 7 is also 1 plus 6. 1 means the only one God, and 6 means man was created on the 6th day. 7 can also mean 3 plus 4. 3 means the Trinity of God, and 4 means all creations of God, where God with man work together to testify. During the 14 years in her sufferings and trials, Sarai's time was met. His enjoyment of labor and achievement. Abram's emptiness grew stronger, and when his time was also met, God once again spoke to Abram. In Genesis chapter 17, we will see how Abram would be called Abraham and Sarai would be called Sarah. We also see the name of the offspring of God's promise. Dear brothers and sisters, grace versus legalism must be experienced in every Christian's life. Grace and legalism will leave imprints in our journey of faith. Every single one of us enter through God's grace. Without the effect of Jesus Christ's redemption, we will not be saved. Yet, for every one of us entered through God's grace, we must experience what Abram had experienced, walking on the path of legalism, until one day we see the value of grace is so much higher than legalism. We can then produce the real offspring of faith in us. We can then construct the character of Jesus Christ in us. Dear brothers and sisters, where are you on the journey of following God? Do you have subjective personal experience of God's grace? Do you abandon measuring the saints around you with law? May God help us. Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for putting ahead of us the account of Abram, so we experience the realization of your grace in us. Help us, please, live a life not of legalism and its bondage, so we can follow you freely in your grace, and so we can receive the saints around us, so that they can also follow you freely in their life. Bless my church with testimonies of your grace. In Jesus' name we pray.